January 9th, 1945, 6:47 a.m., San Manuel, Luzon, Philippines. Major Takeshi Yamamoto, commander of the 2nd Tank Regiment's 3rd Company, watched through his periscope as two M4 Sherman tanks rolled into the clearing 800 meters ahead. Four Type 97 Chiha medium tanks under his command sat concealed in the tree line, engines idling quietly. The morning mist still clung to the rice paddies between them. Yamamoto had spent 3 years fighting in Manchuria and Burma, where Japanese armor dominated Chinese and British light tanks. He'd studied American tank specifications in classified briefings. He knew the numbers: 75mm gun versus his 57mm, 2 inches of frontal armor versus his 1 inch, 500 horsepower versus his 170. In the next 8 minutes, those numbers would transform from abstract data into lethal reality. What happened that morning would force Imperial Japanese Army tankers to fundamentally reconsider everything they knew about armored warfare. This is the story of how technological superiority decided tank battles before the first shot was fired. If stories of courage and ingenuity move you, please like and subscribe. Every subscription helps us honor the memories of those who served. Takeshi Yamamoto was born in 1912 in Osaka, son of a steel mill foreman. He entered the Imperial Japanese Army Academy in 1930, graduating in 1933 and requesting assignment to the newly formed armored forces. The Japanese Tank Corps was designed around a specific doctrine: infantry support in China and Manchuria, where they faced minimal armored opposition. The Type 97 Chiha medium tank, introduced in 1938, reflected this philosophy. Its 57mm gun could destroy Chinese fortifications and suppress infantry. Its thin armor kept weight low for Pacific Island terrain and poor roads. Against Chinese nationalist forces equipped with obsolete tanks and limited anti-tank weapons, the Chiha performed adequately. Yamamoto commanded a platoon during the 1939 Nomonhan incident against Soviet forces in Mongolia. There, Japanese tanks encountered their first technological shock. Soviet BT-5 and BT-7 tanks with 45mm guns that could penetrate Chiha armor at ranges Japanese tankers considered safe. Japanese losses were catastrophic. The lesson was clear but never properly absorbed by high command. Japanese tanks were a generation behind. By 1944, when American forces began reconquering the Philippines, Japanese tank doctrine remained fundamentally unchanged. The 2nd Tank Regiment arrived on Luzon in November 1944 with 47 Type 97 Chiha tanks. Intelligence reports described American M4 Sherman specifications, but most Japanese officers dismissed them as exaggerated. Yamamoto didn't. He'd read captured field manuals. He knew what was coming. He just didn't know how completely it would redefine armored combat. The technological disparity between American and Japanese tanks in the Pacific theater was staggering. The M4 Sherman medium tank mounted a 75mm M3 gun that could penetrate 68mm of armor at 1,000 meters. The Type 97 Chiha's 57mm Type 97 gun could penetrate only 55mm at 100 meters. And that was against vertical armor, not the sloped frontal armor of the Sherman. Sherman frontal armor measured 51mm at 56 degrees, providing effective protection equivalent to approximately 90mm of vertical armor. Chiha frontal armor measured 25mm at 15 degrees, effectively 26mm of protection. A Sherman 75mm armor-piercing round could penetrate a Chiha's armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. A Chiha's 57mm round would bounce off Sherman frontal armor at any practical combat range. The weight difference reflected this disparity. Sherman, 30 tons, powered by a 500 horsepower engine. Chiha, 15 tons, powered by a 170 horsepower engine. On paper, this suggested mobility advantage for Japanese tanks. In reality, Sherman's superior suspension and wider tracks provided better cross-country performance. Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka, commanding the 1st Platoon under Yamamoto's company, had learned this the hard way on January 7th near Binalonan. His 4 Chiha tanks encountered a single Sherman at 600 meters in open terrain. Standard Japanese doctrine called for aggressive assault, close rapidly, use speed and numbers to overwhelm the enemy. Tanaka ordered the attack. His lead tank fired first, scoring a direct hit on the Sherman's frontal armor at 550 meters. The 57mm armor-piercing round struck the glacis plate and ricocheted skyward with a bright spark. The Sherman didn't even pause. It rotated its turret with smooth hydraulic precision. Japanese tanks used manual traverse, requiring several men and precious seconds, and fired. The 75mm round penetrated Tanaka's lead tank through the front hull, continued through the fighting compartment, and exited through the engine deck. The tank exploded. 17 seconds. The Sherman fired again, destroying the second Chiha. 29 seconds. Tanaka ordered retreat. His remaining 2 tanks reversed into cover, engines screaming. The Sherman didn't pursue. It didn't need to. Tanaka survived. His gunner, loader, and 2 tank commanders didn't. When he reported to Yamamoto that evening, his hands still shook. "We cannot fight them in open ground, Major," Tanaka said. "Our guns are useless." Yamamoto had nodded. He already knew. But knowing and experiencing are different things. That night, January 7th, Yamamoto sat in his command tent reviewing after-action reports by lantern light. The pattern was clear. Every engagement between Japanese tanks and Shermans in open terrain resulted in Japanese defeat. Kill ratios averaged 4 Chiha tanks destroyed for every Sherman knocked out, and most Sherman losses came from mechanical breakdown or infantry anti-tank weapons, not tank versus tank combat. He opened his personal notebook, where he'd been documenting American armor capabilities since his first intelligence briefing in November. The numbers told a brutal story. Sherman M4A3, main gun 75mm M3, muzzle velocity 619 meters per second, penetration 68 millimeters at 1,000 meters, vertical armor, frontal armor 51 millimeters at 56 degrees, effective approximately 90 millimeters. Side armor 38 millimeters at 0 degrees. Engine 500 horsepower speed, 40 kilometers per hour road, 26 kilometers per hour cross country. Crew 5 commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver, type 97, Chiha, main gun 57 millimeters, type 97, muzzle velocity 575 meters per second, penetration 55 millimeters at 100 meters, vertical armor, frontal armor, 25 millimeters at 15 degrees, effective approximately 26 millimeters. Side armor 25 millimeters at 0 degrees. Engine 170 horsepower speed, 38 kilometers per hour road, 21 kilometers per hour cross country. Crew 4 commander, gunner, driver, hull machine gunner. The conclusion was inescapable. Japanese tanks could not engage Shermans in conventional tank duels. They needed asymmetric tactics. Yamamoto identified 3 potential approaches. Option 1. Ambush from concealment at minimum range. attack Shermans from hidden positions at ranges under 50 meters, targeting side and rear armor where Chiha guns might penetrate. Problem: required perfect positioning and discipline. One mistake meant instant destruction. Option 2. Combined arms coordination. Use infantry anti-tank teams to disable Shermans, while tanks provided suppressive fire and exploitation. Problem: required coordination that Japanese forces, depleted and scattered across Luzon, struggled to maintain. Option 3. Avoid tank combat entirely. Redeploy tanks as mobile artillery supporting infantry defensive positions. Problem: surrendered the initiative and admitted defeat before fighting. Yamamoto chose option 1, modified. He would position his 4 Chiha tanks in carefully selected ambush positions, but he would target Sherman tracks and vision ports, not armor, immobilize them, blind them. Then infantry could finish them with magnetic mines and satchel charges. It was desperate. It contradicted everything Japanese armored doctrine taught about aggressive maneuver warfare. But Tanaka's shaking hands and the burned corpses of his crew demanded new thinking. The next morning, Yamamoto would discover whether desperation bred innovation or merely delayed the inevitable. 6:30 a.m., January 9, 1945. Yamamoto's company occupied positions along the tree line north of San Manuel. Intelligence reported American armor advancing from the south, likely the 44th Tank Battalion supporting the 25th Infantry Division's push toward the Caraballo Mountains. He positioned his 4 Chiha tanks in a rough L shape, concealed among trees and bamboo thickets. Each tank sat hull down behind earthen berms his crews had spent the night constructing. Fields of fire overlapped, creating a kill zone approximately 200 meters wide. The approach was channeled by rice paddies on both sides. Sherman commanders would stay on the raised road rather than risk bogging in mud. Maximum engagement range, 150 meters to the road's center. At that distance, Chiha 57mm rounds might penetrate Sherman's side armor if they hit perpendicular to the plates. Hold fire until all enemy tanks enter the kill zone, Yamamoto radioed his platoon commanders. Target tracks first, turret rings second, only engine decks if you have clear shots. His gunner, Corporal Kenji Sato, nodded without speaking. They both knew this was suicide with extra steps. 6:47 a.m. 2 Shermans appeared. The Shermans moved at moderate speed, perhaps 15 kilometers per hour, turrets traversing methodically. Their commanders rode heads out in the cupolas, scanning for threats. Infantry didn't accompany them. Overconfidence or tactical error, Yamamoto couldn't determine. The lead Sherman was an M4A3 with the 75mm gun, white star on the turret side. Lucky Strike painted on the barrel. The second Sherman, 50 meters behind, matched its speed exactly. Yamamoto watched through his periscope as they rolled closer. 300 meters, 250 meters, 200 meters. The lead Sherman was almost centered in the kill zone. First platoon, Yamamoto transmitted. Engage lead tank. Second platoon, engage trail tank. Fire on my mark. 150 meters. Fire. 2 Chiha tanks fired simultaneously at 6:48 a.m. and 12 seconds. Both targeted the lead Sherman's left track. The first round struck the front idler wheel assembly. The 57mm armor-piercing shot had enough kinetic energy at 150 meters. The projectile sheared through the steel road wheel and severed the track. The Sherman lurched left, track flailing, and ground to a halt at an angle. The second round missed, striking the road surface and ricocheting into a rice paddy. The crew of Lucky Strike reacted in 4 seconds. The turret rotated right with the smooth electric hydraulic precision that Japanese tankers envied. The 75 mm gun barrel swung toward the tree line, where muzzle flashes had revealed Yamamoto's first platoon positions. Yamamoto's tank fired at the immobilized Sherman. His gunner, Corporal Sato, aimed for the turret ring, the gap between turret and hull where armor was thinnest. The shot struck at 6:48:18, hitting the turret side just above the ring. The angle was wrong. The round glanced off, leaving a gouge in the armor, but penetrating nothing. Lucky Strike fired at 06:48:19. The 75 mm high-explosive round. The Sherman crew hadn't switched to armor-piercing, expecting soft targets. Struck the earthen berm 2 meters in front of Yamamoto's Chiha. The explosion sent dirt and shrapnel skyward but caused no damage. But the second Sherman, Iron Fist, was now tracking on Yamamoto's position. Its commander had identified the muzzle flash. At 06:48:23, it fired. This was armor-piercing. The round struck Yamamoto's tank at the junction between hull and turret, slightly forward of center. The 75 mm AP shot, traveling at 619 meters per second, contacted the 25 mm armor at near perpendicular angle. Physics was merciless. The projectile punched through the armor plate, fragmented inside the fighting compartment, and continued through the opposite hull side. Corporal Sato's body absorbed most of the fragments. He died without sound. The hull machine gunner, Private Yuki Matsuda, lost his left arm below the elbow. He screamed. Yamamoto's right ear was deafened by the pressure wave. His vision blurred, but his tank's engine still ran, and the gun still functioned. "Second platoon," he transmitted through ringing ears. "Engage Iron Fist. I am damaged, but operational." The next 30 seconds dissolved into chaos. Lieutenant Tanaka's remaining 2 tanks from 1st Platoon fired at Lucky Strike, now immobilized but still dangerous. Both rounds struck the Sherman's turret. One ricocheted harmlessly off the mantlet. The other hit the commander's cupola, killing the tank commander instantly, Technical Sergeant James Morrison, though Yamamoto wouldn't learn that name until months later. Morrison's body slumped forward onto the cupola hatch, blocking it partially. The remaining crew, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver, were trapped inside but combat effective. Iron Fist fired again at 06:48:35, targeting Tanaka's lead tank. The round struck the turret face at the gun mantlet. The 57 mm gun shattered. The turret crew, commander and gunner, were killed by fragments. The tank reversed on the driver's initiative, crashing through bamboo into deeper cover. Yamamoto's tank fired at Iron Fist at 06:48:40. The round struck the Sherman's front right fender, damaging the suspension but not disabling the vehicle. The Sherman could still move, though with reduced speed. Second Platoon, commanded by Lieutenant Kazuo Nakamura, engaged from the L-shaped short side. His 2 tanks had better angles on Iron Fist's more vulnerable side armor. Both fired at 06:48:42. First round, hit. The 57 mm AP shot struck Iron Fist side sponson, above the track but below the turret ring. The armor here was only 38 mm, oriented vertically. At 120 meters and perpendicular impact, the Chiha's gun had just enough penetration. The round broke through. Inside Iron Fist, the projectile wounded the assistant driver and ignited stored 75 mm ammunition in the sponson rack. Flames erupted. The crew had seconds to evacuate. Second round from second platoon. Miss. It struck the road 10 meters behind Iron Fist. At 06:48:46, Iron Fist's crew began emergency bailout. The driver steered the burning tank off the road into a rice paddy. The crew evacuated through hatches, 2 men carrying their wounded comrade. Iron Fist continued burning. Smoke billowed black against the morning sky. 1 Sherman destroyed, 1 immobilized. 0 Japanese tanks destroyed, though 2 were damaged. For 8 seconds, victory seemed possible. At 06:48:54, 3 more Shermans appeared on the road from the south. Yamamoto's stomach dropped. Intelligence had reported 2 tanks. This was a platoon, 5 Shermans total. The 3 new tanks accelerated, their commanders having seen Iron Fist burning and heard the radio reports. These crews were combat experienced. They didn't bunch together. They spread into a line abreast formation, moving off the road despite the mud risk. Maximum dispersion. Multiple angles of attack. All tanks, Yamamoto transmitted, disengage and retreat to phase line bronze. But Lieutenant Nakamura's 2nd platoon was in poor position for retreat. The L shape that provided excellent ambush geometry now trapped them. To withdraw, they'd have to reverse through thick bamboo and jungle, exposing their thin rear armor to 3 advancing Shermans. Nakamura made the only decision his training permitted. He attacked. At 06:49:02, both of his tanks broke from concealment, charging the advancing Shermans at maximum speed. 21 kilometers per hour across rough terrain. Closing the distance was their only chance. Get to point-blank range where even Chi-Ha guns might penetrate, or die trying. The 1st Sherman fired at 06:49:06, range 400 meters. The 75mm round struck Nakamura's lead tank, commanded by Sergeant Takeshi Ito, in the front glacis. The shell punched through, detonated inside the crew compartment, and blew the turret completely off the hull. The tank rolled forward another 30 meters on momentum before the driver's body slumped onto the controls and it crashed into a berm. 4 men dead in less than 1 second. The 2nd Sherman fired at 06:49:09, targeting Nakamura's own tank. The round struck low, hitting the forward road wheel and severing the right track. Nakamura's tank spun violently left from the impact, throwing the crew against the interior walls. The engine stalled. The 3rd Sherman moved to flank, circling right to get a side shot. At 06:49:15, it fired at 200 meters into Nakamura's immobilized tank's side armor. The round penetrated, continued through the entire vehicle width, and exited through the opposite side. Nakamura's tank burst into flames. The lieutenant managed to crawl from the wreckage with 3rd-degree burns across 40% of his body. His crew didn't. Yamamoto's remaining tank and Tanaka's damaged vehicle were now alone against 4 operational Shermans. Lucky Strike was still combat effective despite its broken track. The American tank commanders understood the tactical situation. They'd located the ambush positions. They had overwhelming firepower advantage. There was no rush. They'd methodically eliminate the remaining Japanese tanks with minimal risk. At 06:49:30, all 4 Shermans fired nearly simultaneously. 1 round struck Tanaka's already damaged tank, finishing the destruction begun minutes earlier. The tank exploded. Tanaka, still in the commander's position, was killed instantly. 3 rounds targeted Yamamoto's position. The first missed entirely, sailing overhead. The second struck the earthen berm, collapsing part of it, but missing the tank. The third hit Yamamoto's left track, severing it. His tank was now immobilized. Dead turret crew. Wounded hull gunner. Broken track. 1 functioning gun with perhaps 15 rounds remaining. Against 4 Shermans advancing in coordinated formation. "Abandon tank," Yamamoto ordered. Private Matsuda, hemorrhaging from his severed arm, couldn't move. The driver, Corporal Hideo Taniguchi, refused to leave him. "Carry him," Yamamoto commanded. "That's an order." Taniguchi lifted Matsuda in a fireman's carry. They evacuated through the rear hull hatch at 06:49:45, running into the jungle. Yamamoto followed, pausing at the tree line to look back. His 4 tanks, his entire company, were destroyed or abandoned. 12 men dead. 5 wounded. 0 Shermans destroyed. 1 immobilized Sherman that American recovery teams would repair within hours. The smoke from burning tanks rose into the clear morning sky. 8 minutes of combat had proven what Yamamoto had known intellectually, but now understood in his bones. Japanese tanks could not fight American armor in conventional engagements, at any range, under any conditions, with any tactics. The Type 97 Chi-Ha was simply obsolete. As American infantry appeared on the road, beginning their sweep of the abandoned Japanese positions, Yamamoto melted deeper into the jungle. Private Matsuda would die from blood loss before they found a field hospital, but Yamamoto would survive to write his report. Some truths had to be documented, even when they guaranteed defeat. Yamamoto reached the 2nd Tank Regiment's fallback position at 2:30 p.m. January 9th, 7 hours after the engagement. Of his original 47-man company, 31 survived to retreat with him. 16 were dead, 4 Chi-Ha tanks destroyed, 0 enemy tanks destroyed. Captain Shiro Ishikawa, the regiment's operations officer, sat with Yamamoto in a captured Filipino farmhouse that evening. Maps covered the table. Unit status reports painted a grim picture. The entire regiment had engaged American armor that day, across multiple positions. Results were consistent. Japanese losses catastrophic, American losses minimal. The 1st Company lost 6 tanks to 3 Shermans near Benalonian, Ishikawa reported. The 2nd Company, your engagement. The 4th Company reported 5 tanks destroyed, 2 damaged, in exchange for 1 Sherman knocked out by a lucky shot to the engine deck. Yamamoto nodded slowly. His right ear still rang from the pressure wave. The image of Corporal Sato's body, perforated by armor fragments, wouldn't leave his mind. 15 Japanese tanks destroyed today, Ishikawa continued. 2 American tanks destroyed, 1 by anti-tank mine, 1 by our tanks. This is not sustainable, Major. It was never sustainable, Yamamoto replied. Our doctrine assumes technological parity or superiority. We have neither. The Chi-Ha was designed to fight Chinese infantry and obsolete tanks. Against American armor, it's a death trap. Ishikawa was silent. Criticizing Japanese military equipment bordered on defeatism, a serious charge. But the evidence was undeniable. Yamamoto opened his notebook and began writing. Combat reports were mandatory, but he wrote something additional. An analysis intended for tank forces who might fight another day in another war. He documented the engagement with brutal honesty. Type 97. Chi-Ha cannot penetrate M4 Sherman frontal armor at any practical combat range. Sherman can penetrate Chi-Ha at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Conventional tank tactics are suicide. Recommend: avoid tank versus tank combat entirely. Deploy tanks as mobile artillery in defensive positions. Use ambush tactics only when absolutely necessary, targeting tracks and vision ports, not armor. Combined arms coordination with infantry anti-tank teams is essential. He sealed the report in an envelope addressed to Southern Army headquarters. Whether anyone would read it or act on it, he didn't know. By February 1945, Japanese tank forces throughout the Philippines had absorbed the lessons from San Manuel and dozens of similar engagements. The adaptation was informal, spreading through surviving tank commanders rather than official doctrine changes. High command in Tokyo still issued orders calling for aggressive armored counterattacks. Field commanders ignored them. The new approach dispersed tanks individually in prepared defensive positions, hull down, supporting infantry strongpoints. When Shermans approached, Japanese tanks would fire to suppress American infantry, forcing them to deploy and seek cover. This bought time for Japanese infantry anti-tank teams, armed with magnetic mines, satchel charges, and Type 4 rocket launchers, to close within effective range. Tank versus tank engagements were avoided absolutely. If a Sherman spotted a Japanese tank position, the Chi-Ha would retreat immediately, sacrificing position to preserve the vehicle. Tanks became mobile artillery pieces rather than maneuver weapons. Lieutenant Masao Hayashi, who survived the Battle of Luzon commanding a platoon in the 10th Tank Regiment, documented this shift in his diary. "We no longer seek glorious tank charges. Sherman armor is impenetrable to our guns. Their guns destroy us at distances we cannot even see them clearly. We hide. We wait. We support infantry. This is not the armored warfare I trained for at the academy, but this is survival." The kill ratio improved marginally. By March 1945, Japanese forces were destroying approximately 1 Sherman for every 8 to 10 Japanese tanks lost. Still catastrophic, but better than the 15-to-1 ratios from January. Most Sherman losses came from mines, infantry anti-tank weapons, or mechanical breakdown, not tank combat. American tank crews noticed the change. Sherman commanders reported that Japanese tanks, previously aggressive to the point of suicidal, now avoided direct engagement. Staff Sergeant David Chen, tank commander in the 44th Tank Battalion, wrote home in February 1945. "The Jap tanks used to charge us head-on, which was crazy but showed guts. Now they hide. You see one, take a shot, and it disappears. They're using them like artillery instead of tanks. Probably smart. Our 75mm goes through their armor like paper. But it makes them less effective. Their best anti-tank weapon is infantry with satchel charges, not their tanks." Captured Japanese documents from February and March 1945 revealed the extent of the doctrinal shift. One particularly revealing document, a tactical directive from the 2nd Tank Regiment, possibly written by Yamamoto, though unsigned, stated, "The Type 97 Chi-Ha medium tank is obsolete against American M4 Sherman. Penetration of Sherman armor requires point-blank range, under 50 meters, and perfect angle. This is almost never achievable in combat. Chi-Ha armor provides no protection against Sherman 75mm gun at any range. Therefore, do not engage Sherman tanks in direct combat. Your death accomplishes nothing." The directive continued with alternative tactics: ambush positioning, combined arms coordination, prioritizing infantry support over tank combat. It concluded, "This is not cowardice, this is mathematics. Technology has made conventional armored doctrine obsolete. Adapt or die." By April 1945, as American forces approached Manila, Japanese tank forces had effectively ceased to exist as armored formations. Individual tanks continued fighting from prepared positions, but the concept of Japanese armored maneuver warfare in the Pacific had ended at places like San Manuel. The technological gap had proven unbridgeable. Major Takeshi Yamamoto survived the Battle of Luzon. He retreated with remnants of the 2nd Tank Regiment into the Sierra Madre Mountains, where they fought a delaying action until the Japanese surrender in August 1945. He returned to Japan in October 1946, repatriated through Manila. The Osaka he remembered had been firebombed. His family's home was ash. His father had died in the final months of the war. His mother and sister survived, living in a refugee camp on the city's outskirts. Yamamoto was 33 years old. He had fought for 8 years. He had survived campaigns where 70% casualty rates were common. He had commanded tanks that were obsolete before the first shot was fired. He never spoke about San Manuel. Not to his family, not to fellow veterans, not in the occasional reunions of armored forces, veterans that occurred in the 1960s and 1970s. When asked about the Philippines campaign, he would say, "We did our duty." He worked at a steel mill in Osaka, the same mill where his father had worked, first as a laborer, later as a quality control supervisor. He married in 1951. He had 3 children. He kept his service notebook in a box in his home office, never opened after 1946. In 1973, when the Japanese Self-Defense Force introduced the Type 74 main battle tank, a modern vehicle with a 105mm gun, composite armor, and laser rangefinder. Yamamoto attended the public demonstration. He watched the tank fire at targets 2,000 meters distant with precision the Type 97 Chi-Ha could never have achieved. He was 61 years old. He said nothing during the demonstration. But witnesses recalled that when the Type 74 hit a target at maximum range, destroying it with the first shot, tears ran down his face. 28 years too late, Japan had the tanks it should have had in 1945. Yamamoto died in 1986, age 74, of lung cancer. His funeral was attended by family and mill co-workers. No military honors. The box with his service notebook was buried with him, unopened. The engagement at San Manuel on January 9, 1945, lasted 8 minutes. 4 Japanese tanks destroyed, 16 Japanese tankers killed, 1 American tank immobilized, 0 American tankers killed. Those 8 minutes confirmed what Japanese tank commanders had feared since 1943. They were fighting with weapons from a previous generation against an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority. No amount of courage, training, or tactical innovation could overcome the fundamental disparity between a 57mm gun and a 75mm gun, between 25mm armor and 51mm armor. Yamamoto's analysis, "This is not cowardice, this is mathematics," was never officially adopted by Japanese high command. But it spread through the ranks anyway, transmitted in whispered conversations between surviving tank commanders. By war's end, Japanese armored doctrine had effectively ceased to exist. Technology, not tactics, had decided the outcome before the battle began. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share. Comment below. What other untold stories from the Pacific War should we cover? Thank you for watching.